Hey viewers, it's Alex from the NIA support team. This video is on how to update your iAiming device with an Apple Wi-Fi enabled device. We've made this video to hopefully better explain the process and simplify it for our viewers. The process is risk-free and will bring the latest features and improvements to your device. Before we get started, there are some things you'll need in order to complete this update. The first thing is your iAiming scope. You'll want to back up all files that are on there prior to this update, and also ensure it is fully charged. You'll also need a device to install the iAiming app on, and you'll want to get the latest version, which will be on your relative app store. And in this case, you will need a password for your home Wi-Fi network. First up, you will need to get your iAiming's Wi-Fi details. To do this, grab your scope and go into the menu using the dial. Scrolling through the menu, you will see a Wi-Fi icon. Select this and turn it to on. Once it is selected to on, tap the button again and you will have now turned your scope's Wi-Fi on. You can then get out of the menu by holding the button down for a second. You will then need to clarify the scope's Wi-Fi password. To do this, go back into the menu, scroll down to the second page, click the setting icon, and then you will see an option shown that will show your scope's Wi-Fi password. In this case, my password is the default, which is 87654321. If you select this, you can go through and change these numbers if you have a preferred password. Once completed, hold the button for a second to get out of the menu, and you will have to do this again to get out of the second menu. Now that we have your scope's Wi-Fi details, the first step is to connect the device to your scope. So, in this case, we'll go to the settings, Wi-Fi, and in this list we can see our iAiming 612, so we're going to connect to that. The password should be what you found before. In our case, it was 87654321. Once done, hit join. We can now see we're connected to the iAiming. So we'll go back to the main screen and to the iAiming app. Now on screen, we can see our device is connected. If for any reason you cannot see your device, you can hit the refresh and connect buttons. It should show up then. If not, it's best to close the app, go back to the settings, confirm you're connected, and come back in. But we're going to go into the scope. In this screen, we can see a bit of information about the scope. We've got the serial number, hardware, software version, and various other firmware versions. In this case, we can see these bottom two are not populated. This will change when we update them, and we will also update the software. So to do this, we'll go into firmware update. So these are the three updates available for the iAiming. The software update generally brings new features, improvements, things you'll notice. The FPGA firmware and the ARM firmware are firmware updates for components within the scope. It is necessary, however, to do these updates before updating the soft. So, in this case, we're going to start by doing the FPGA firmware update. So we can go ahead and select that update. You'll now notice on screen, it asks us to disconnect the device from the Wi-Fi to check for the latest firmware version. So in this case, what it's referring to is disconnecting the scope from the tablet and connecting back to our Wi-Fi hotspot at home. So to do this, we will go back into the Wi-Fi settings via the home screen. And find our home network under Wi-Fi. In this case, our home network is NIA iAiming, and we can see it here. For your home network, this should be the password you would have located at the start of the video. and it should be provided usually by your internet provider. Now that we are connected, we're going to go back into the iAiming app and check for the latest version. As you can see, it's now found a new firmware update. So we will now choose the download new firmware option. Before updating the firmware on the scope, it's important to make sure that the zoom function is set to its highest setting. Sometimes if this is not done, you can have the scope hang on an update. This will not damage the scope, but you will have to repeat the process. So we're just going to set it to max zoom right now. And while we've been doing that, you can now see that the firmware update has been downloaded and it's asking us to update. So we'll have to connect the iAiming back to the tablet now. As you can see, it says connect device to Wi-Fi and updates, referring to the iAiming. So we'll go back and do that now. In settings, Wi-Fi, and there's our iAiming 612. So we're going to connect back to that. As you can see, we're now connected. And go back into our iAiming app. Now that we're there now, we can click update now. Generally for most updates, it's best to look at the tablet. The scope is not always consistent in what it shows, but the tablet will give you feedback. Once the tablet tells you the scope is updated, you should be ready to reboot the scope, and it will prompt you to do that. The update is now complete, so we can click confirm and exit and restart the iAiming. To do this, just hold your power button down as you would normally to turn it off, and then once off, turn it back on. Now that the iAiming is back on, we need to turn the Wi-Fi on as we did at the start. So you can just go down to the Wi-Fi icon in the menu of the scope and turn it back to on. After you've done this, you can put the scope back down and we'll proceed updating it on the device. So the first thing to do is once again, go into your settings and connect your device back to the scope. So we're back in Wi-Fi, the scope's back on our list, we'll select that. We connected it once again, so we'll go back to the iAiming app. Once again, we're back in the main screen of the app, so we can go ahead and click our scope and go straight back to firmware update. So now we're going to update the ARM firmware. So once again, we just need to connect our device back to the internet to check for a firmware update. So we'll go back into the wireless settings. And we've connected back up to our home network and back into the iAiming app. We can now check for a version. And we can see a new version has been found. So we'll now download that version. And once again, while that's downloading, we'll get our scope and wind the zoom function to the highest setting. So now the version has been downloaded and we're ready to update. So we just need to connect our scope back up. So once again, back to the home screen, back into settings, and select our scope. We connected back up now. So we'll go straight back into the iAiming app and hit update now. As we can see, the tablet's now said that the update is completed. So once again, we'll hit confirm and exit and restart the scope. So once again, just holding the button, power it down. And now we'll power it back on. And then turn the Wi-Fi back on as we did before. So just through the menu, down to the Wi-Fi icon, change the setting from off to on, and exit the menu, and you can put the scope back down. So now once again, we'll connect back to the scope. So straight into settings, find the scope in the list, and once again we're reconnected. So we'll go back into the iAiming app, we'll be back on the main screen as we were before, straight into the device. We'll notice now that we've updated these two firmwares, we actually have a version showing here, so that's a good sign, and we're definitely ready to update the software now. So we'll go ahead and click firmware update, soft firmware update, and once again, we now just need to connect to our home network to check for the version. So we're now back connected to our home network. We'll go back to the iAiming app and hit check. As we can see in this case, there's a new firmware version once again. So we're going to go ahead and download it. And while downloading it, once again, make sure that that zoom is set to its max. The download is now complete. So we're ready to update the scope. So let's connect it back, and we'll go there in settings, select the scope once again, we connect it to the scope, back into the iAiming app, and hit update. So we can see now that the firmware is updated. So once again, we'll hit confirm and exit and restart the device. Your iAiming scope should now be updated. So from here, you should be good to use it. But if you want to check that the update has gone on, you can do this in the app. So in this case, we've connected it as we saw before in the video, and we're just going to have a quick look. So we'll click on iAiming, and we can see our version numbers there. In this case, we've taken the software to 2.3.1, and that's the latest firmware as of the time of making this video. Now I'll just show one extra thing. If we go into firmware update and go through the process as we had before, you will see when I click check latest version, it'll just have a pop-up come up in a moment saying latest version now. This is what you would see if your scope was already up to date. And if you see that, you can go back using the little arrow up here and check the next software version. So you don't need to disconnect and reconnect your scope. You can just simply check the next one. If they're all up to date, then there's no updating to do. I hope this video has helped you update your device. Don't be afraid to have a go with this. It's a very simple process, and if there are issues, it's very unlikely you can harm the device. If you do encounter issues doing this, don't hesitate to contact Naya or your local dealer. Thank you for watching.